Okay, so we have some folks that are walking this way and I'll let them come in, but we should be,
I think it's running both of you.
so,
I think I have both of you on the screen.
so Bob Lacitra is here. And we're getting ready to start just in the way of announcements as folks are
Hang on.
coming in. This weekend is MACBF. We're live.
Am I?
Yes, we are. Yeah, it's 6 o'clock.
All right, I'm sorry, I can't waste your time anymore, I have to go.
Bob can't waste everybody's time. Um,
Camera.
the, you were wasting time with this camera. Okay, you told me to do that, so I believed you. I just had never witnessed it before, so that's fun.
Lucky for him, we're
We're
starting.
there for Bible study, yeah. You could have kept him on the line for Bible study, that would have been.
I should have.
Just a reminder, this weekend, Mid-Atlantic Cooperative Baptist Fellowship will be meeting, Friday night at 7 o'clock. The Baptist Women in Ministry will screen the movie that's been touring, they've been touring the country with, Midwives of the Movement, talking about women in the pulpit, and Meredith Stone will be here to lead that. It'll be 7 o'clock, right where I'm sitting, of the movement.
No.
You got it right this time. And then the sessions will be, on, Saturday as well. And so looking forward to that. When last we left our heroes, we were in the book of Exodus. Moses was desperate to get out of going to Egypt to talk to Pharaoh. We had talked about how there really was no one better equipped for this job than Moses, but everyone would agree with that except Moses, I think. He started with, well, who are you? Or who am I that I should go? God said, you're the one I've chosen. And Moses says, who are you? God says, Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh, which we normally translate because of the Greek, I am that I am, but as we talked about, could go through all sorts of possible permutations of being, was, am, will be, or even cause to be. W.F. Albright believed that that was a possible translation there. So the arguing takes 2 chapters. So Moses is absolutely convinced he's not. Sometimes, every prophet has this moment of argument where they don't feel worthy for this calling or they don't want to go on the calling. I mean, in the case of Isaiah, it was just, whoa, I'm a man of unclean lips. In the case of Moses, it was 2 chapters worth of, I don't know who you are, why are you picking me? What am I going to show? What am I going to, I'm the wrong guy. And I love where he finishes on this, but let's look at some of his excuses as we continue on. Moses answered, but suppose they don't believe me or listen to me, but say the Lord didn't appear to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw the staff on the ground and it became a snake. Yeah. Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he reached out his hand and grasped it. And the staff became a staff in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. So he gives him this sign of the staff. He also gives them a sign of a withered hand. Put your hand in your robe, put your hand back out, gives them this additional sign. Moses still not ready. Moses said, oh my Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor even now that you've spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. And the Lord said, who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. I love the response Moses gives now, right? We've tried all the excuses. Who am I? Who are you? What if they don't believe me? And then Moses finishes with, my Lord, please send someone else. I don't have any excuse. I just don't want to go. Please send someone else. And this one got upset. The anger of the Lord was kept against Moses. And he said, what of your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak fluently. Even now he is coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him, put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you should do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him. Take in your hand this staff, and with it you shall perform signs. So Aaron is to Moses as Moses is to God. Moses is a prophet for God. Aaron will be the prophet for Moses to speak for him in this, to take away all.
Quite something to be told, you're going to serve as God.
That's basically, yeah, you will
You'll
be.
be God.
I think it's a metaphor, I think, is in this
I think
case.
so.
I don't want to read too deeply into this. I think it's a metaphor. So,
I am interested in some of the Hebrew behind this,
okay,
because God just said, I am, earlier.
He did.
Where we started, but then in
well,
about
in the Greek.
three
Oops.
verses back, when he says,
Is it not I?
yeah, when he says, the Lord, and that's God talking.
Is it not I
Remember what-
Yahweh? It would be Yahweh. Is
Yeah.
what it has there.
Okay,
Yeah.
the same word, when we see it
Mhm.
in the same LORD with.
LORD with capital ORD. Anytime you see that, it's Yahweh.
So when God is saying, I mean, God uses Yahweh.
God uses the third person.
In
God
the Hebrew,
conjugates, yes.
that's the way they, okay,
That's
yeah, I
right.
just wanted to,
Yeah.
I
God
didn't want to
conjugates
assume that, I
God's
thought
name.
that.
Yeah, which I've always thought was fascinating. God uses the first person to say, I am, that would, to pick a tense. And then he says, go tell them he has sent you. He actually conjugates his name, which is fascinating. Bob, you have a look at the question on your
Yeah,
page.
sure, the snake, did you draw any, linkage between that and the Genesis?
And oh, the Genesis text, I don't. Or the Numbers text, right? Later on, when the plague comes in Numbers, he
Yeah,
has to,
there's a, that's.
bronze serpent there as well, and the plague of serpents. No, I had never made any connection there. In this case, although. Let me make an indirect connection, Bob. You got me thinking along those lines. Egypt was one of the nations around Israel that on some level venerated a snake. And then that's why the pharaonic headdress looks like the cobra, and it actually has a snake on the front of it. And it's always up, ready to strike. And you probably remember my reading of Genesis 3, on your belly you will crawl, is not about locomotion, but about honor. That no longer will you be up and honored, now you will be down and rejected. And if we want to make that connection, it could very well be that he's showing that he has the command of the serpent that Egypt would be venerating. It's a possible, that's just off the top of my head, but I think it's a possible connection. That I hadn't considered, that the use of the serpent in Egypt, a place that honored serpents, like even on the pharaonic headdress, there might be something to that. I don't know that we can connect the withered hand that way, but there might be.
Where was the withered hand?
I didn't read that part. It's verses 10.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
He skips the ones that he doesn't like.
I skipped the ones to move us on.
God
Otherwise,
was giving him more signs.
I am happy to read every verse, but I found others are less happy for me to read every verse.
That's okay.
So I try to pick the big ones.
Then don't mention it.
Fair enough, fair enough.
I think it's interesting that he does, Moses says these people aren't gonna, the people are
They
gonna
don't believe
leave.
me, yeah,
So he does these signs
right,
in front of no one but Moses.
but right. Well, he's supposed to go show them later.
Oh, what, the staff is a staff again. It's
Yeah,
not a
it is,
snake.
but he's gonna throw it down later. He's showing him he's got this in his bag now. He can,
Oh,
when he
okay.
gets to
I thought he
Egypt.
threw it down
No.
then and he picked it up.
so he's gonna not only tell them God spoke, and by the way, the staff became a snake. No, really.
Yeah,
No, I think he's actually gonna,
okay.
That's,
yeah,
The Levite,
yes,
so,
they're both Levites, actually.
so Moses, yeah, well, I guess if they're brothers,
Yeah,
so
right, right.
they would be. Why was that important to point out, I guess?
That's a good question. Aaron is important to point that out because he becomes the first high priest. And of course, the Levites become the priestly tribe, and the Aaronic line becomes the high priest line. Eventually, the Zadokite high priest line becomes the high priest line because Zadok was the high priest of David. But yeah, I think they're probably drawing home that priestly emphasis there.
Moses won against God.
Moses won. He did. He at least got some concessions. I don't know that he won, but
All right, I'll buy that.
they met somewhere in the middle. He still had to go, which is not what he wanted to do.
It also struck me that I wonder the number of times that God was angry with Moses.
No, that's true.
So here's one,
One,
and
yeah,
we know there was one when he whacked
yes,
the rock,
right.
and I don't know whether there are others or not, but
Those are the only two I can think of. Most of the time, he's angry at the people
yes, yeah, that's what I
and
mean.
tells Moses, I'm just gonna make a new nation out of you because these people are driving me crazy. And Moses usually talks, Moses wins there, where he talks God out. We'll get to that in Exodus 32, when he talks God out of destroying the people. But,
Mhm.
yeah,
Was God being mad at Moses, sort of like the deacon chair being mad at the
at the
pastor?
pastor. Maybe
Sort of
so.
an analogy there.
I don't get mad.
So you're saying the
You
deacon
did.
chair is in the role of God and the pastor's in the role of Moses?
Yeah, well,
Interesting.
that's a Baptist tradition.
Interesting Baptist metaphor there, yeah. I mean, we aren't hierarchical, but I'm not sure how that works either. All right, so it is interesting to me what happens next, because there's not a lot of forthrightness coming from Moses in this story right after this, after he agrees. And I'll point him out first when he goes to his chotain, his father-in-law, for lack of a better translation. Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, please let me go back to my kindred in Egypt to see whether they are still living. Just want to see if anybody's still alive down there. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. The Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all those who are seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons, put them on a donkey, went back to the land of Egypt, and Moses carried the staff of God in his hand. So he's not exactly completely honest with Jethro here of why he's heading back to Egypt, which is interesting. A lot of interesting things that happen here. This is not the weirdest thing that's about to happen. We'll talk about that.
Well, he is doubting. And
He
if he
is.
says, God told me to go, they're gonna go, Moses, what were you
Right.
saying?
Right. This
Were
is,
you burning some?
that's sort of my argument for, when people tell me that they don't think Abraham was gonna go through with the Isaac sacrifice. And they say, well, look, it's right there in the text. He says to the young men, go and the boy and I will return. And my argument is, what's he supposed to say? I'm gonna go kill the kid and I'll be right back, right?
Right.
Then they go, what? No, you
Right,
can't do
they were
that.
trying to stop.
They would try and stop him, right? So maybe, right? Maybe he's still got his doubts here. So,
Or at the very least, he didn't think they would buy it.
Right.
So he's not gonna use that as a reason to go.
and what's his,
Self-confidence.
he doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. We are going to see that he doesn't fully, well, there's cause for there to be friction between he and the Midianites. Right, remember later on in the story, the Midianites are the bad guys. They actually have a confrontation with Israel in the end of Numbers. And so Jethro is a Midianite, his wife is a Midianite. He's not 100% honest here. And then we're about to get another weird section we'll talk about in just a second. The Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I put in your power, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let people go. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. But I said to you, let my son go that he may worship me, but you refuse to let him go. Now I will kill your firstborn son. So God gives away the whole plot before they even get to Egypt. Now, I've got a couple of things to say. You know what? I forgot to get. I'll get it in just a second when I talk about it. We'll talk about hardened heart in a minute, but one word just to get into that. Remember, Pharaoh was perceived by the Egyptians and himself, I guess, as an Egyptian, as God, not as embodying God, not the image of God, not the son of God, God.
Mhm.
They believe themselves to be divine. So a contest between Yahweh and Pharaoh in the ancient mind is a contest between two gods. It is not a contest. We would see it obviously as God and a human being. That's because that's the way we read it. That's not how anybody would have heard this story, right? It's two gods facing off here, which is the stronger one. And Yahweh is already saying, I know how this is going to go, and I'm going to win, and he's going to lose. So another word of encouragement for a person with no self-confidence in this story. So, yeah. Don't worry about heart. We'll talk about heart and heart more directly in a second. Anything else there that we want to highlight?
It's kind of, was killing the firstborn son the first,
It was not, it was the 10th.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I
So
sort of skipped all that.
he gave away the whole plot. I mean, spoilers from the very beginning. He's not even gotten there yet. But he knows how it's going to go. He knows Pharaoh's not going to listen. I gotta be perfectly honest, I don't think you need admissions to know that Pharaoh's not gonna listen.
But is he not gonna listen because God hardened his heart?
Well, we'll talk about that. I told you, hold on to the heart and heart questions. I'll get there. Okay, we'll do it now. There are several places in Exodus where God hardens Pharaoh's heart. There are several places where Pharaoh hardens Pharaoh's heart. And there's several places where his heart hardens and we don't talk about who did it. Okay, so here are the scripture references for that. I want to get something real quick to show you. I forgot to bring it out of my office. Show and tell tonight, very exciting. This is a representation of what happens in the afterlife for Egyptians. So you have Osiris, and you have the judgment here. And it's not a great resolution, I'll pass this around. But what you can see, well, this is gonna be a real good question, is whether or not you can see it on here.
I'll let you know if it shows up. Go ahead and hold it up to the camera.
And
Say something so the camera.
I will say something so it focuses
There
on
we
me
go.
more
Okay.
directly.
And it's
but-
right there.
Yeah, you can see a scale in the middle
Yeah,
and the heart on one side and a feather on another.
you can sort of see that.
And so the heart in the afterlife is measured against a feather. If the heart is heavier than a feather, then that half crocodile, half human being, no, half hippopotamus, half crocodile, God, Emet, truth, will consume the heart and the person, and will be denied existence in the afterlife. What is another element here that's worth remembering, the word harden is also the word for heavy in Hebrew. So God is basically saying, Pharaoh can't stop me, and I can deny his afterlife, in fact, in all of us. Remember the contest again between two gods here. And basically God is saying, Pharaoh's not a match for me. So all of this is, I think, helpful context, particularly that afterlife illustration. People have been messing with or trying to understand this notion of hardening of the heart, and it's not one that we're probably gonna come to any,
I like that heavy,
but it is, yeah, hardened, heavy, and interesting enough, glory
gives you a heavy heart.
are the same words.
Glory?
Glory, glorify and glory. It's the same word as heavy. Yeah, well, I don't think that's the meaning that it's intending here, no. There's ranges of meaning, some words in some context, but yeah, so sometimes when you see the word, if you see the word glory or glorify, it's the same word for harden or heavy. It's still a modern Hebrew word for heavy, actually. But when I was excavating, one of the guys was complaining about carrying the buckets because they were heavy. But when I heard it, I said, they're glory and glorify. I said, it's heavy. He's like, oh, they're using modern Hebrew and they just meant heavy, but it was the same word. Interesting.
So we, in our current culture, most of us consider confidence a positive quality.
Mhm.
So would the hearers of this story back then interpret that as God is, Yahweh is a confident God showing power, or?
Yeah, I think so. It is absolutely a statement of who's the stronger God here, right? I've already said, I'm gonna harden his heart and he's gonna lose. And you can.
So because I'm thinking, that's not painting him in a very good light, like you said, not overconfident, but it's just, I don't want to use another word, but you know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But no, this is a good thing
Mhm.
to the reader, that this is showing a good quality of this God.
The outcome of this battle is not in doubt before it even starts. God,
Yahweh knows,
the God of
Yahweh's a
Egypt,
more powerful God.
this greatest, most powerful, at this time, most powerful empire in the world, led by this person who's divine on earth. No chance against me.
No match.
No chance against me. I mean, already saying from the very beginning, so, yeah.
So why does he go through all 10 of those?
Well, apparently, we gotta get him there.
So Matthew is wondering, why did God harden Pharaoh's heart? We're gonna get into
We'll
that.
get there, yeah, to get the people out of Egypt. Right, and I'm wondering, we're saying hardened heart, and of course, we are thinking, overcoming free will, right? That's always what we're thinking. But I wonder how much of this is a lot like Isaiah 6. And that is that when Isaiah is told that he's going to go and he's going to confront Israel with their sin, and they're going to go right to destruction as a result of it. I wonder how much of this is you go and tell the strongest man in the world that he has to let go of his slave force. Confront him with that. And like I said, you don't need omniscience to know how that conversation is gonna go. I mean, you know how Pharaoh's gonna respond. We've been around, that kind of an arrogant, power hungry person to know that he's going to react against it. So how much of hardening Pharaoh's heart is simply being confronted with the choice to honor Yahweh and let Israel go worship in the wilderness, which we'll talk about in a second. So yeah, it's all to get Israel out of Egypt. I'm wondering what the mechanism of the hardening is. Is it simply the confrontation of the message? Hey, humble yourself, let us submit to Yahweh. We're leaving. And at that point, that's off the table, right? Pharaoh immediately doubles the weight.
I think probably, yeah, and if they hadn't gone through all of those steps, he probably wouldn't have
Right,
finally given in.
Right.
And then let it, well, even then he changed his mind.
Correct.
And sent the
correct. Yeah,
troops.
even at the end, he changed his mind, so, yeah.
Peterson, uses stubborn, is that too soft a word?
Probably not. I mean, how does he work that into the sentence? I will stubborn him, I will make him stubborn,
Yeah.
I will make him stubborn,
I will make him
so
stubborn.
that he will refuse.
Yeah, that's probably fine. Yeah, I think you're losing, obviously, you're losing some of the poetry, and I think
Yeah.
the image of the scales in Egyptian afterlife and
Mhm.
hardened and heavy, I don't think that's an accident, right? That you get those two, that word specifically used, because other ways that he could have said that, and to choose that, I think is intentional. So anyway, I'm not gonna answer this to all of our satisfaction, because people have tried for years. So we'll just be comfortable with our discomfort on this and move forward a little bit. Because now we have what for me makes probably the top 5 of the weirdest passages in the Bible. We've already seen some weird ones. Genesis has its share, but this one's on the list because we've had God spend 2 chapters talking Moses into going to Egypt. He's given him signs, he's given him wonders, he's given him Aaron, he's told him how it's all gonna play out. It's all gonna be okay. Moses is finally going, right? So he's got his wife, he's got his kids, he's on his way, and we get the one episode that no one ever puts in any movie or tells in any story or any Sunday school material. On the way, at the place where they spent the night, the Lord met him and tried to kill him being Moses. Well, that's a twist we didn't see coming. Don't worry, it gets weirder. But Zipporah took a flint, cut off her son's foreskin, touched Moses' feet with it, and said, "Truly, you're a bridegroom of blood to me. So he, that is God, let him alone." It was then she said, "A bridegroom of blood by circumcision." There you go. That's it. 3 verses.
So that's when he got circumcised.
No, Moses was already circumcised. I'm
Oh.
convinced. Gershom, his son, gets circumcised.
Oh, I'm sorry, right,
Yeah.
because that's how they recognized him as a.
I'm assuming that's how they
Well,
recognize it.
right, he made some assumptions back, then.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Right,
Getting
so-
confused for a minute.
There is so much here to worry about. One of my students loved, the Lord tried to kill him. Was a great translation, right? That's so the God of all creation is going to kill Moses, but Moses is shifty. He's got a good first step, and like Jacob wrestling, couldn't catch him. Tried, what is tried to kill him here? And I think the Hebrew's a little softer, it's more like intended, I think, than tried. But anyway,
Intended sounds like you can change your mind.
right, well, clearly God does.
Peterson went the other way,
How'd he go?
would have killed him,
Oh, would have killed him.
would have killed him, but
Oh, interesting.
Now, that's a good one.
I could live with that.
Oh, I don't like that though.
No, you don't
I
like that
still
one?
don't understand why God would want to kill him.
Well, why would God want
What
to
are
kill
we
him?
talking about? Moses?
Moses, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Why would God want to kill him? Why would Zipporah know what to do? Why did what Zipporah did make God happy? right? These are all good questions.
I think the last one is the hardest.
It's a tough one. Okay, I can help a little bit. I've taught this before, but if I teach you this, you can't unlearn it. I'm sorry. This is an important bit of Old Testament information. And that is that on rare occasions in the Old Testament, the word feet can be used as a euphemism for genitals. Okay? So she circumcises Moses' son, takes the foreskin from Moses' son, and touches Moses' feet with that. Now, why does that help us understand this story? You're asking. Because Moses' son is uncircumcised. Moses' wife is Midianite. Moses has been working for the Midianites. Moses is now taking his Midianite wife and his uncircumcised son on this calling that God has committed him to. I believe what is happening here, is that Moses is trying to hold on to that life, the life that he chose in the wilderness. And that he's not fully committed, if you will, to being a Hebrew of Hebrews. I read this as a symbolic circumcision because you can't recircumcise. So I see this as a symbolic circumcision of Moses. We would say in Baptist terms, a rededication of his life, if you will, to this mission that God has called him to. And he does, after this, the Hebrew says in Exodus, 16, I believe, that Jethro and Zipporah returned, that Jethro brought Zipporah back to Moses after she had been sent away. That's her next appearance in this story. So sometime after this moment, and when she returns, she is sent away, which is the Hebrew word for set free, and in some contexts, divorce. And so I think it is possible, if not likely, that after this event, she goes back to Jethro with Gershom and the children. Because she's never mentioned in Egypt. She's in all the movies, but she's never mentioned in Egypt.
When God said go, he didn't say take your
He did
family,
not say
right?
take
He
your
said.
Go, take Aaron.
go.
But he didn't.
Yeah, he
Take
mentioned
Aaron.
the family members that
Right, another
were
Hebrew.
supposed to go.
Correct. So I think that's what's going on. It's still weird, and I'm not preaching on this anytime soon. But I think that's what's going on. I mean, now, how did Zipporah know this would be okay? I mean, she's from a priestly family. That's all I can offer you.
Okay, now. And Zipporah is saying truly.
You are a bridegroom of blood to me.
Moses are
Yes.
a bridegroom of
Blood to me, yes.
So God let him, Moses
Go.
alone.
Correct.
Man, that's as bad as my English.
Well,
used to be.
And by the way, Hebrew doesn't have the nouns. This is a literal, they just he, him, all the way through, and it's up to the reader to know which he is him and which him is he. So
I still don't understand.
So like I said, that one for me goes in the top 5 of strange ones. Not in any of the movies. It's not in the 10 Commandments, not in Prince of Egypt. They don't do that.
So that would be a good sermon,
You think so?
top 5.
You think that would be
There should be a top 7, I think.
you think it probably should?
7's a better.
Top, maybe top 6 because they're weird, right? You would want
Top 6.
you don't want a holy number for
666.
Yeah, exactly. Bob's always helping with ideas like that. So.
Yeah, so far none have been taken.
They're under advisement.
Pretty
They're under advisement. So,
Hang in there.
so
Keep looking.
after this, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go so that we may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness." He didn't say, "Let me go." He just said, "Let me go so we can go celebrate a festival." Pharaoh said, "Who is Yahweh that I should heed him and let Israel go? I don't know Yahweh, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews just revealed himself to us. We just got this name. This just got this God's name. Let us go 3 days journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord, or he will fall upon us with pestilences or sword." So he's not, it seems, asking, set them free at this point. Let us go celebrate a festival. 3 days, we'll be right back. Promise. It doesn't say we'll be right back, but that seems to be the implication.
That's the
So he's either
implication.
being deceptive or he's gonna try to do it incrementally.
Well, remember God said, because Pharaoh won't let you come worship me in chapter 4. When he gave the spoiler, he didn't say let you go, he said let you worship me.
Yeah.
So God, this seems to be the first question. I don't know. Are we trying to just get the Hebrews' rights while they're in Egypt? I don't know. But if you don't, we're gonna fall under the pestilence of the sword by this Lord our God, Yahweh our God. But the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors. Pharaoh continued, now they are more numerous than the people of the land, and yet you want them to stop working? That same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their supervisors, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go, gather straw for themselves, but you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they had made previously. Don't diminish it, for they're lazy. That's why they cry, let's go offer a sacrifice to our God. Let heavier work, same word by the way, be laid on them. Then they will labor at it and pay no attention to deceptive words. They just got too much free time. That's what the problem is. So the taskmasters and the supervisors of the people went out and said to the people, thus says Pharaoh. Notice that phrasing. Thus says Pharaoh, which
God.
calls immediately to mind, thus says Yahweh, thus says the Lord, right?
Yeah.
So you can hear the context in
Mhm.
this. Thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go and get straw yourselves wherever you can find it, but your work will not be lessened in the least. So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The taskmasters were urgent, saying, complete your work, the same day assignment as when you were given straw. And the supervisors of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and were asked, why did you not finish the required quantity of bricks yesterday and today as before? So it's everyone's suffering, even the Egyptians now are suffering. And they're not being asked to make bricks without straw. We're no longer providing the straw. You gotta go get your own straw, make the bricks, but the order hasn't changed. You still need to produce the same number. And when you don't, the people supervising you are gonna suffer. And the Israelite supervisors came to Pharaoh and cried, why do you treat your servants like this? No straw is given to your servants. They say to us, make bricks. Look how your servants are beaten. You are unjust to your own people. And he said, you're lazy, double there. That's why you say, let's go sacrifice to Yahweh. Go now and work, for no straw shall be given to you, but you shall still deliver the same number of bricks. The Israelite supervisors saw they were in trouble when they were told, you shall not lessen your daily number of bricks. As they left Pharaoh, they came upon Moses and Aaron, who were waiting to meet them. They said to them, the Lord look upon you and judge. You brought us into bad odor with Pharaoh and his officials and put a sword in their hand to kill us. I haven't double checked. I'm wondering if that word odor is the same as it is, if that's literal, because nose is connected to anger in Hebrew. The word for nose and the word for angry are the same. You often get that sense of snorting like a bull when they're angry, I think is the reason that they're connected there. And so I'm wondering, and often pleasant odor is good and bad odor brings anger. I mean, there's a connection between odor and anger, and I'm wondering the whole bad odor, if they're playing with that in Hebrew. I haven't checked that, I have to look at that. But everyone's suffering. These supervisors are either supervisors of the Israelites or Israelites who are supervisors. It could go either way. So they could either be Egyptians or they could be Israelites, but they're mad at Moses and Aaron too, because they're suffering as a result of this experience. Everybody's mad at Moses and Aaron, right? Because now they have more work. They're being called lazy. And all Moses has done is what God told Moses to do. And everyone's mad, which Moses likely anticipated, which is why he didn't want to go to begin. So you hear Jonah, did I not tell you this is what would happen? So anyway. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
I think we already did that.
Yeah. All right.
I can't help but think if he did it exactly like, cause he said, go and take Aaron, and
Right.
he took his whole family
Right.
and then explored that
Right.
and. But the other part I was gonna mention, God said, he will not let you worship
Right.
me, and he says, can we go for a few days of
To
worship?
worship God. Yeah.
Okay, so that part he followed,
He did. He said that right.
alright, so then it's
Not.
not so much like he didn't, he
No,
did
it's
what
not
God
like
asked him to
he
do.
did. He did what
He was
God.
obedient.
He apparently did exactly what God asked him to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we should, or
Right.
I'll
Yeah.
go with that.
Moses complaining. Moses turned again to the Lord and said, Lord, why have you mistreated this people? Why did you ever send me? Since I first came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he's mistreated this people, and you've done nothing at all to deliver your people. So Moses has no problem getting in God's face, ever. Moses is the only person in the Bible who gets away with telling God to repent. He tells God to do it, well, twice if you count the Psalms. Once in Exodus 32. He doesn't use the word repent, but he tries to change God's mind in Numbers 14. And then in the Psalm, Moses cries out to God, turn and relent as well.
That's a very human thing to do.
He's the only one who gets away with it. Amos tries,
Well,
but
but Jesus on the cross, why
why
have you forsaken me?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a
I mean,
very,
it was a moment, but
It was.
he said it.
he did. He did. Yeah, there's no, I mean, this is a model for Hebrew prayer, a model for Hebrew faith, frankly. I mean,
Right.
the Psalms themselves have no problems getting in God's face.
So how many generations later would you hazard a guess that the Psalms were penned after the?
I mean, it could be, well, there's a record of a Psalm in Exodus 15, right? As soon as they cross the sea, we have the Song of the Sea.
Oh, right.
Miriam sings as well. And so there are songs being sung now at this point. And so who knows
Yeah.
how many we might have that show up as, oral traditions that be written later. But
Yeah,
I mean, David comes probably 250 years after this.
yeah.
So not long.
But
In the span of the Old
he was following that tradition.
That tradition, absolutely.
He wrote the most
Yeah,
famous ones.
I did. Yes, he
Who
did.
gets credit for writing the most famous?
As you guys maybe know, I've been doing a lot of translation lately, and I translated a number of verses of one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 88, which is the most depressing Psalm, period. It's the most depressing Psalm and one of the three most depressing chapters in the entire Old Testament. It is a really dark, the last word is darkness. The last word is not hope. There is no hope in Psalm 88. The only thing the psalmist asks God for, it's only a complaining psalm. All he wants to do is gripe about, hey, God, I just wanted you to know my life is terrible and I know it's your fault. I just needed you to know that. That's the whole psalm, basically.
And I blame you.
I blame you. My life is terrible. You haven't answered my prayers. I come daily. My hands are open and you are bringing nothing but chaos to me. I mean, that is the whole, but my favorite part for years, I'd said, the only thing the psalmist asks of God is at the very beginning, and most Bibles have, "O Lord, the God who saves me, incline your ear to my cry." That's the way most translations go. So listen to me. Okay? I was doing the translation, and the word for cry is not the word like za'ak, like the Hebrews did. That's not the sort of general cry out in anguish. It's the word that is used for birds of prey, a piercing scream kind of cry that he said, listen, look, God, literally lean your ear down here and listen to my screeching, piercing cry in your ear, which is just a beautiful, I think, display of honesty. There's no concern about God being offended or taking it wrong. There's more this deep desire to be who you are before the divine. So Moses models that same thing. Right?
Yeah.
Listen to me.
You feel the emotion and the intense
Not like-
emotion.
It's almost like they believe God knows you're thinking it, so you might as well just go ahead and have the conversation and get it out. Yeah, you might as well get it out. Because it's the closest relationships are the ones we can be the most honest in. Should be anyway. Mary Margaret, sorry.
So you have done nothing at all to deliver your people.
No.
Apparently Moses thinks he's supposed to set them free.
Apparently.
Moses, what? I
Thinks
didn't
they're
hear.
supposed to set it free, even though they've only asked about worship at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is part of the whole plan, right? We're gonna go worship and then we're sneaking off after they let us out. I mean,
That's
Pharaoh
probably
knows
what
that.
Moses figured.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's just gotten worse, God. You didn't ask me to do this and it's just gotten worse. So the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Okay, here we go. We're just getting started. Indeed, by a mighty hand, he will let them go. By a mighty hand, he will drive them out of his land. So I've remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the Israelites, I am Yahweh. I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians, deliver you from slavery to them. So he won't even let them go worship. So now God's all right. Now he had his chance. I gave him a chance to do it the easy way. We're going to do it the hard way. And deliver you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my people and I will be your God. You shall know that I am Yahweh, your God, who has freed you from the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I will give it to you for possession. I am Yahweh. Moses told this to the Israelites, but they would not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and their cruel slavery. So that's the way it goes sometimes. Then the Lord said to Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let Israelites go out of his land. So now it's too late. We just wanted to leave for a little bit, not now. But Moses spoke to the Lord. The Israelites have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me, poor speaker that I am? Never letting God off the hook. I don't want this job. Thus Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, gave them orders regarding the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, charging them to free the Israelites from the land of Egypt. Thus the Lord said to Moses, see, I've made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you. Your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his land. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. It's always signs and wonders. It's not plagues. We always call them plagues, right? But marvels, wonders, things. It's never plagues. It's interesting. I mean, signs, of course, are always those things which confirm the prophet is telling the truth. That's what a sign is. And so it's showing that you're actually being honest. So it's not so much to wear them down and convince them to let you go. It's supposed to show that Moses is telling the truth, really. Let him go. In some way. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, because Pharaoh, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and bring my people, the Israelite, company by company out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. The Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites from among them. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. So he was 2 generations old and Aaron was a little older.
You know, Aaron was the
He's
eldest.
the older brother, yeah. Apparently Zipporah is too, because she was enough to speak Zipporah may be the firstborn, because I don't think that anyone younger than 3 could have had that negotiation with Pharaoh's daughter about, do you want me to go find a nursemaid? So I think Miriam must have been older than Aaron. Yeah, so he's 2 generations old. He spent 1 generation there's a father. He spent 1 generation in the wilderness, spent 1 generation in Egypt. He's 80. So the marvels, the gifts, the things started, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a wonder, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff, throw it down before Pharaoh, to become a snake. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, did as the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and they became snakes, but Aaron's staff swallowed up theirs. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. So he's actually, I do find it interesting that the miracle was matched in this, right? And
Well, but then it was topped.
it was topped, right? Because we ate your staffs. So what you gonna do now? Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water. Stand by the riverbank to meet him. Take your staff in your hand, the one that was turned into a snake, because you needed to know which staff that you were supposed to take. Say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you to say, let my people go so they may worship me in the wilderness. But until now you've not listened. Thus says Yahweh, by this you shall know that I am Yahweh. See, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it will be turned to blood. The fish in the river shall die. The river itself shall stink. The Egyptians shall be unable to drink water from the Nile. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff, stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, its rivers, its canals, its ponds, all the pools of water, so they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout the whole land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded in the sight of Pharaoh and his officials. He lifted up the staff, struck the water in the river. All the water in the river was turned to blood. The fish in the river died. The river stank, so the Egyptians could not drink its water. But there was blood throughout the whole land of, and there was blood throughout the whole land of Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not even take even this to heart. And all the Egyptians had to dig along the Nile for water to drink, but they could not drink the water of the river. So that's a lot of blood. There are some people who interpret this as not the Nile turned to blood, but reddening of the Nile. In other words, tying it to the flooding that would happen on occasion. We'll talk about that at the end, but I do think it's interesting that not long after this, Pharaoh's magicians can't meet the miracles anymore. They do okay for the first couple, but not long after that, they don't get there. 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. So we have 10 plagues. I'm not gonna go through all of these. Nile to blood, then the frogs, then the gnats, then the flies, then the cattle pestilence, boils, hail, locust, darkness, and ultimately the plague of the firstborn. By the way, sometimes the word for frog, I still find this funny. I'm gonna share this with you. Sometimes the word for frog is singular. It's singular once in Exodus and it's singular once in the Psalms. And I'm sure that it was a collective noun, that you could use like, moose or something when you have plural. But I still like to imagine that send him a plague of a frog. The plague of the single frog that has terrorized the Egypts is something that calls to mind every now and then that makes me laugh. And I don't know which is funnier, whether it's a giant, kaiju frog like Godzilla, or if it's just this little frog that's driving Egypt crazy in the plague. I don't know, but it's plural it's plural some of the time, but it's also singular some of the time, which just makes me, I don't know, I just think Hebrew's funny in that way. So.
Is there any sequence here, any, these random?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are people who try, well, let me come back here. I'll get to the end first and I'll come back. There are people who try to connect these to the Egyptian gods, and some of them kind of work, right? There was a god of the Nile, and there were other gods that work with some of those, but some of them don't, right? And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Some want to talk about 3 cycles of 3, plus then the 10th plague is something new and different, which it is. Some want to talk about it as natural events, and then when I was saying the reddening of the Nile, some people try to. John Tullock, in his introduction to the Old Testament, tried to attribute all of these to the regular seasonal flooding of the Nile that might just be worse this year. So that, and although on one level I'm like, well, okay, he's right that supernatural and natural distinctions wouldn't have made any sense to the ancient world. They thought the gods flooded the Nile after all. And if Yahweh is trying to take credit for something that happens all the time, it makes sense why Pharaoh might dismiss or the Egyptians might dismiss if this is, no, okay, this happens all the time. Sure, it's worse this year, but you know what? Maybe there is something to this. Maybe it's not going away. We better let the Israelites go. No, see, it went away. We told you it goes away all the time. I mean, so that it kind of explains the Egyptian response if it was tied to something at least that the Egyptians understood. So maybe it was natural events. But as I've said many times, for me, an explanation for an event doesn't make it less miraculous any more than it would for the ancient world. I've never seen a satisfactory list of Egyptian gods that these plagues are attached to. Some maybe, but I'm unconvinced. These do seem to be very separate issues. It also is interesting that when these stories are told, like for example in the Psalms, when they're sung about, the order is not important. In fact, in the Psalms, darkness is usually talked about first. And then there's one of them in the Psalms uses caterpillars as one of the plagues too. Which we don't have that in the Exodus list, but okay, So obviously the wonders themselves, the one thing that everybody agrees on is darkness was a part of it and the death of the firstborn was a part of it. Those are the two that seem to always be talked about, the animals and sometimes there's lightning along with the hail. Sometimes there's lightning along with the darkness. Sometimes there's fire along with the darkness. So they're marvels, they're wonders. They're talked about a lot of different ways. And I don't get too wound up about it like some people do. Darkness and firstborn seem to be the only two that you really hold on to. And I think darkness is probably held on to because of the spiritual quality of it that leads us into the death of the firstborn. So. Pharaoh rose, wait, go too fast, there we go. At midnight, the Lord, Yahweh, struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. I should point out that Yahweh did this. In all the movies, they often try to soften it a little bit, right? The angel of death or the death angel or something. No. The Lord says, I myself will go through the land of Egypt. At midnight, Yahweh struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, all the firstborn of livestock. Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Same word cry that happens for the Hebrews at the beginning of the book, right? It's this cry of anguish. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, rise up, go away from my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship Yahweh as you said. Take your flocks and your herds as you said. Be gone and bring a blessing on me too. I don't like the translation, bring a blessing on me. I think it could mean leave so that I can be blessed because you're killing us. Or the word for blessing is also sometimes, the word curse in Hebrew, depending on the context. And so I'm wondering if there's some play there going on. Go and, or you'll also bring a blessing on me, could another way, or also bring a curse on me. Could be another way to translate that, which would also work. But, it could go either way in that. So they finally get.
I'm thinking that this battle,
Mhm.
so to speak, that he was in with
With
Yahweh,
God, yeah,
was like to be, even though he didn't want to he conceded to let him go, and then it was over.
right.
So I don't know if you call that a blessing, but it hurts when I do this. We'll stop doing
Stop
it.
doing that, yeah. Yeah,
And it feels good when
When I
something
don't-
doesn't hurt anymore.
right.
So
Right.
I know that's a weird way of
No, I think
describing a blessing. But
I honestly think if you interpret Barak as blessing here, which you can, which obviously NRSV does, I think that's the way you have to read it. That go away so that I can be blessed by your absence and all, because this stuff is killing us, right? But it could also be go away or you'll also bring a curse on me. That's another way to read it, which would be totally legitimate grammatically. I already mentioned this, but the death of the firstborn is God. God is not acting according to lex talionis in doing this. At the beginning of the book of Exodus, Pharaoh wants to kill all the males in the Hebrews. At the end of this story, God kills only the firstborn. So God does not respond in kind. Pharaoh attacked his children, but God did not attack Pharaoh's children with the same power, although God was more successful than I think Pharaoh was, as you can see by Aaron and Moses being alive here. So while we would often struggle to interpret this as one of those passages of violence in the Old Testament, I think the ancient mind would understand this as an act of mercy by God, culturally speaking. Even weak, right? You didn't escalate the violence against Pharaoh. You shouldn't. You're allowed to. You didn't even act on what you were allowed to do. So. All right, so that's as far as we're gonna get tonight. We'll have to cross the Red Sea later. So,
Thank you.
final thoughts, questions?
Well,
Bob?
you skipped several chapters.
I was gonna do the Passover. I did.
Well, I mean, of these, of Pharaoh negotiating or back and forth.
Yeah, the back and forth,
Pharaoh's,
and then backing out of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pharaoh's,
Yeah,
which is it, but then the other thought I had was, the age, so Pharaoh probably knew Moses.
maybe. But remember how many kids would be in the house? I mean, all the movies say he does.
Yeah.
Because that makes for a good movie.
I just think age-wise, I don't know how old Pharaoh is.
Right.
But Moses is 80.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his father.
I mean,
Pharaoh's a father.
maybe Pharaoh and Moses actually grew up together.
Maybe. That makes for good drama in a movie. But I
That's
mean,
in the movie.
that's always in the movies, yeah. That because it's always the daughter of Pharaoh, as opposed to one of the 60 daughters of Pharaoh that finds Moses. And you don't know how many kids are in the palace.
Yeah, right.
So maybe, it makes for a much better story, I think, if they do, but,
So we'll do this again next Wednesday, but then Wednesday after that is Holy
it's
Week.
Holy
We
Week,
will
right?
not
And we will not
do
have
Bible
it.
study.
Yeah, so we'll get them across the Red Sea next week.
Okay.
And talk about Passover leading up into Holy Week. So that's why I say Passover till next time. All right. Well, thank you so much for your good attention and your good attendance,
Thank you.
your good thoughts.
Understood.